Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia, chapter 382. 382. Hey everyone, I'm recording this on a Tuesday, hoping that I get it out before the stream, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, hey everyone, hope you had a good week. We're back for Hero Academia. We have 382. I think overall, it's a chapter that I will always remember because it was such a fun time on the stream. So many people were getting things right. It was a great time. It was a great time reading the spoilers. Again, it will be one of my fondest memories of the Hero Academia experience. I'm very happy. Shout outs to the live stream crews of White Despair, Jason Thomas, Kayla, Ty, Miguel, AN683, Mark, Prower, and Skelly. Anyway, more people's names will come up, but you know, like, we'll bring them up as they come up. Any general notes for 382? Well, there's a few plot movements that kind of occur in 382, and there's a few things that make me wonder. So yeah, there's a few things, but I think we'll just go through the chapter bit by bit and see the spots. I'll bring them up as they come along, but I don't think this will be too. I don't think this is too complex of a chapter. I think that the author he's really getting to the point, and I think this will matter more when we talk about Kirishima in particular. But I think he's getting to the point a little bit faster, and so, especially too because like we're running out of characters that can feasibly arrive. So you know, like there's less and less elements that are coming up. I really do believe that as we go into the future, Hero Academia is going to become more and more easy to predict, just because every week we're cutting down on what could possibly happen. Using Nagant and Gentle at this stage, you know, like, that's a pretty big marker that we're getting to the end here. Like in terms of like other big what the heck kind of moments, not counting the Machia thing that happened here. You still have the international heroes maybe, but yeah, we're kind of getting to the end of Hero Academia. I think at this point Hero Academia is going to become easier to predict. Because of that, I have made a new bingo sheet that we will go through at the end so you guys can see what I'm hoping for, what I'm thinking is going to happen for the end of Hero Academia. That'll probably take the most time, but hey, it's prediction, so maybe you'll like it. Okay, so, Shonen Jump, do you think that they are going to screw me over this week? I don't know. We've been on the white screen for very long, and they haven't gotten the recent videos, so hopefully that's a good sign. Let's begin the chapter page-by-page walkthrough. Okay, so the first page, really interesting, also very funny. Like, I keep coming back to this whole thing about liar, right? Oh, let me move it here. Yeah, there we go. Liar. Like, I just think it's funny how Horikoshi did that. The panels are also just very interesting to look at. Definitely creative. Again, I think really good. I do love it when Horikoshi does something special with the panels. Let's move there so you can see that. So I like how he has this situation and it branches off. Now he did try to maintain, like on a technical level, he tried to maintain that this branching thing because he was trying to make this work with the idea that this could go either way for either of the two. That both of them were seeing a reality, but only one of those realities was right. So you had to have that thought running concurrently with the both of them. It was an interesting technique. I don't think it works 100% well because it makes like a later part kind of confusing. But the first page, I think really it worked really well. I like the visuals here. How you have the situation was not, and then you look at these two things, the opposing sides, and you go into as it could have been. So really like this. Again, very creative. It does require a little bit of intelligence from the reader to understand what is going on and how to read that. But if you can read, I assume you can figure out what's going on here. I would assume that people that are interested enough to watch a video about it are probably way smarter than the people that would have an issue with figuring out how to read this. Again, I really want to believe that everyone who read this understood the technique that happened here, but you never know. Anyway, moving away from that horrible thought, I like this. This was pretty cool. And of course, I do like the little visual thing that Horikoshi did here. If you notice the characters like Dabi, he has a little bit of the white halo around him. That's just to identify where they are in the mess of things. Things did not work out the way Toga wanted. We will talk about that, but we do see here that All For One is here. I'm a little bit sketched out by this because you never really know what could happen with when Vestige shenanigans get involved. I have no idea what's going on in that guy's psyche. And I like All For One's one thing. I have no idea what's going on in Shigaraki's psyche, alright? Like, this is actually a little bit concerning because you never really know what kind of trick All For One will pull with a clone. Anyway, just know this is confused Shigaraki most likely. During the live stream there were a lot of questions like when exactly did Toga like take measurements for these guys, but it's just like take them before the war. Like that's super easy to get through. And when you look at All For One's outfit, yeah, like she pretty much took these measurements before the war. Given Dobby's situation, of course, took it before the war. Like right before they were to attack Izuku, even would be fine. Anyway, yeah, no, for an opening page, I think it was really good. Now this page has a lot of things that I really truly love. Now, when we were looking at the spoilers, this moment here is really interesting because this calls back to something that happened with Shigaraki when he actually arrived on the battlefield in front of Izuku, where it looked like he wasn't able to use his quirk when he first arrived there. And so, when you're looking at that first page without getting the information, it's like, is Shigaraki having the same problem he had at the beginning of the arc? But then it looks like, no, it doesn't look like that's the situation because we find out that Toga actually has a bigger problem. But it was very interesting that we have similar imagery popping up, and when I look at that, though, it really just shows you how much Horikoshi uses the imagery of Shigaraki touching the ground and not destroying it to indicate something. So it's an interesting, like, habit to see here. I mean, any situation where you're, like, in a point where you're wondering, like, is it this thing or is it another reason? You're already in a relatively complex situation, and at that point, things don't get very clear unless you explain something. On that note, thank God that he had Tsuyu narrate for us what was probably going on. So he's probably not having an identity crisis at that moment, or he's having an identity crisis, but it's not the reason that this isn't working. Like, anyway, this is one of my favorite moments here. You see a giant earth wave, and you see a little bit of gloop. I assume that Shigaraki just got dusted, alright? But yeah, look at that giant earth wave, right? And who do you think made that gigantic earth wave? There's really only one person that can make earth waves like this, but I just want to point it out because it's like, yeah, this is what she should have been doing. You see, like, the thing with me is that, alright, you want to bring Inasa in and you want to, like, invalidate the Twices? No problem, but my point is that Pixie-Bob should have been invalidating Twices. Like my big, like, of course we all know why it went down the way it did, because you need to, like, get the tension going to be able to bring someone else in. Like, you have to make it look bad for someone else to show up and make it look better. Like, it's just fundamental, like, dynamics. But you know, my whole thing is, like, I just don't think it's plausible that these heroes were unable to give Pixie-Bob the opportunity to Earthwave. Look at the amount of ground that this woman covered. Because, again, this has to be Pixie-Bob, because he's the only one that can do this right now while everyone else is distracted. Look at the amount of ground this woman covered, right? There is no way she 100% knew all the heroes that were in the way of that earthwave, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they actually don't care about the locations of heroes. This woman will let things loose once she gets the opportunity to let things loose. My point is that I don't think it's plausible that she couldn't do this earlier. But it all makes sense in the context of the story, and, like, it doesn't actually really matter in the long run. It's just, like, again, when you're dealing with, like, high power people, you got to be relatively careful with their capabilities, because especially in Hero Academia, people are so capable that the story does a lot to try and bludgeon them in the knees to make them less capable when it doesn't really make sense. And in the case of Hero Academia, like, I think sometimes Horikoshi should put more effort into making it feel correct as opposed to just forcing things to look a particular way. But again, like, the big thing here is that if you actually use people to the best of their abilities, a lot of things in Hero Academia are just invalidated. Anyway, again, it's just an interesting thing to just point out here. The defense that people can use for Horikoshi is that, oh, well, you know, now that Inasa is there, he can give Pixie-Bob the opportunity to do this because there's less pressure, and, like, of course, in that sense, Horikoshi, like, you know, there is a logic you can use if you want to defend Horikoshi. And again, you know, props to Horikoshi, because he knows how to defend himself when it comes to scrutiny. Okay, so we have here Tsuyu, there's someone flying in the sky, we have Ochako. It took me a while to realize who this was, but now that I'm zooming in on it, that's Jiro. So interesting that Jiro was running with them. Given that Ochako's touching her fingers together, she must have been using something. Anyway, I love that Tsuyu became the one who is putting everything together. Like, thank God, bless Tsuyu, although it's unfortunate that Ochako didn't get to do that. So this page, when we're first reading it in the spoilers, you know, caused a lot of contention. People were saying things like, oh, that's convenient plot armor, that came out of nowhere. Like, even me, like, I was not very happy with that. I had to, like, do a little bit of work to make it work in my head. I do think that the wording that the final issue uses is very good to explain it. So I can accept it at this point, and like again, doesn't really matter because we're at the end. Like, do whatever you need to do to make things possible. Like again, bludgeon people in the knees because that's the only way you're gonna get the story to continue going at this level of power. Anyway, the whole construction here of how Suyu comes about figuring this out is good. Now, when it comes to this actual thing, that there's some sort of compatibility issue, I do love that Horikoshi did keep this very vague, and you have Suyu trying to figure this out. I like this. I do think overall this is legal. I do think this works, just as long as you have the right explanation for it. Like, knowing Hero Academia, knowing that quirks have a habit of mutating or coming together and creating new things, I mean, One for All is the basis of that. It makes sense to me that you could say, like, yes, when Toga's quirk in particular comes into contact with another quirk, there might be some kind of unique interaction that is born because of the union of those two quirks. In this case, the union comes by her, like, transforming into twice. I think if you used an example of, say, Dobby, and let's assume that if Toga transforms into Dobby, let's assume that she can use his quirk. It's not what's happening in the manga, but just assume that real quick. If you had that situation and you had Toga using Dobby's quirk, and you saw that she could not hit the same level of temperature as Dobby, I think it would be really reasonable to say that, it's not a binary choice. It's not if Toga loves you, it's about how much she loves you. So when you look at Toga and you look at Dobby, it's like, if she goes there and her version of Dobby's quirk isn't as powerful as his, that kind of makes sense because like she doesn't love Dobby as much as she would love Izuku or Ochako. Like that makes sense. So the logic is there if you say that the maximum output of the quirk that she copies is dependent on her emotional intensity. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It makes sense. You just gotta say like there's some like quirk mutation shenanigan that happens, or like some quirks coming together makes things weird. That's pretty much what's happening here. I'm just giving you like another way of interpreting it. Now, when it comes to the twice situation, it makes sense. Like if you look at it, Toga doesn't love twice in the way she loves Ochako. So it makes sense that if we're doing the more spectrum-based approach, that the double quirk is going to be ultimately affected by the magnitude of her love. Now, in this one, Suyu goes with another thing, saying specifically that it goes beyond the double quirk, and the restriction is based on the clones that are being created. I find that one finicky. I think the better move here is to say that the double quirk itself is impacted. Because that fixes a lot of things other than having to do the second jump. But again, this is like a personal taste. I would just say, like, if I was doing this, I wouldn't say that it's what the double clone. I wouldn't say it's the identity of the clones that matters. I would just say the problem is with the double quirk itself. That's just cleaner. Now, there are other things that kind of happen here that I am very concerned about, because I would say Toga loves Shigaraki. I would say Toga really, really cares about Shigaraki. I think that at any moment, things could go really, really wrong. So, right now we're having a reprieve. Now this is where I'm going to say props to the author, because this is where you see that the guy is very smart. This is probably one of the most important panels when it comes to the whole Toga situation, and also with just showcasing how intelligent Horikoshi is. Suyu being able to say that Toga's emotions are finicky, and this is a high-stress situation such that if this is based on this girl's feelings, it could go either way. That's really intelligent, because you could have just left it there with like, hey, she probably can't use the quirk right now, so let's take her down and blah, 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 whatever. But this is really good. This speaks about a complex emotional situation. The other thing that this does is that it opens a possibility for Toga to later use Shigaraki's quirk or to later use Dobby's quirk. So what you have here is that the author is covering his bases. He's giving actually a very good emotional logic, and he's opening a door for if Toga needs to use the K later, she can do it now, because Suyu has premised that emotions can change in the heat of the moment because it's a super stressful battlefield, which makes sense. Now, I'm pretty sure that when we come around to the point where Toga uses the K, if she uses the K, there's going to be people saying like, oh, yo, bro, but you said she couldn't use it because she doesn't love Shigaraki. And these people will, of course, conveniently forget that people's feelings do, in fact, change. That's why it's really important that you have these little moments here just to say that Horikoshi, like, set this up for you, bro. Anyway, jokes aside, this is a very good thing that Horikoshi did. And again, respect to him, because this would have been my concern, but he addressed it right here. Like, Suyu is thinking the way that the most concerned readers should be thinking. So overall, this page ends up saying like, hey, this is why even though Toga's not an issue now, we should deal with her. And that's how Horikoshi adds a little bit of tension to the situation. We then have this thing right here where Ochako's wondering what might give her away. So this is like setting up that Ochako was looking for her. Man, this is a face that only a mom can love. Actually, no, wait, Toga mom didn't love her. Okay, I showed a little bit of Toga's body and I thought, wait, no, she's naked. I can't show this. Okay, so we have this little bit of Toga here, right? And I did see that Toga got a bit of criticism for this, and I do think it's funny to make fun of her because she's a bad person. But yeah, let's take this step by step. She loves Tomura and Toya, but unlike Jin and Ochako, their quirks aren't working for them, or working for her. Cool. Awesome. Again, this one puts a lot of importance on the clones. Interesting. Now, these lines here, I did like it. I really did like it. Even when I tested it before the big battle, nothing, even though I love them to bits, even though that love should be there. I love that. I love that she's realizing that, hey man, you can't force love here. You'll love them, but not the way your body wants to love them. So I like this. I like that she has a real physical proof that there are different kinds of love. And there's no telling how exactly she's going to interpret that. And again, we see the all heroes must die here, which then leads into the big page. The why can't I become Jin? Now, if you guys remember, I was saying a lot of times that like with Toga, like one of her big things was that she was going to end up crying about not being able to be twice. Now, this is one of my predictions, and I really do love that Jason Thomas, like really respected that I made this prediction, that this was going to be the thing with Toga, that she was going to end up crying about not being twice. I gotta tell you, man, like I really thought that after she started making the twice clones that maybe we weren't going to get like the most extreme version of it. But I'm glad we actually ended up going to that spot where she's actually crying about not being able to be twice. I do think though that the twice clones themselves aren't perfect. And after this chapter, I'm not really sure what's going on with those twice clones. I'm not sure if those twice clones are actually Toga, like doubles of Toga as twice. I'm not sure. It feels like these are like broken twice clones because they're all thinking like all heroes must die. Like we've seen the twice clones when Twice made them. They have the thought patterns of the original person. I just don't think. Yeah, no, like I don't think the I don't think the double quirk that Toga has is actually working to its fullest potential. I think it's impaired. Anyway, yeah, no, man, this was a really great moment. I'm really happy for it. Really happy we got to get it. This makes sense for Toga. This makes sense for who she is. Yeah, she's crying about not being able to be twice. Although, like, again, Tsuyu made a good point. Things can change, but I'm glad that we got to this moment. We then go into this critical moment where Toga is identified by Ochako, with the narration being she always loves seeing people happy, so of course she zeroed in on her tears, and that's a narration. So that's Horikoshi's hand right there. I do love, before we go into that we have just the utter destruction that is Dark Shadow in the background. That is terrifying. Dark Shadow could have killed Toga if he wasn't careful there. Man, wasted opportunity. Anyway, props to White Despair because he was saying that Ochako was ultimately going to be the one that was going to note where Toga was in the crowd, and she found her by tears. Now, the thing with tears is that these twices are very angry, and in the previous chapter, one of the previous chapters, we even have imagery of a twice, because of the rain falling, has a tear running down his eyes. So I do think it's very finicky to talk about like she zeroed in on tears, because technically all these twices are crying like out of pure frustration. I do think that's finicky. I understand the metaphors, I understand the symbology, I understand the history in the character that justifies that. Finicky. Very finicky because you use tear imagery on a previous twice. I'd be very careful with that. If you were doing it, I would recommend not doing it. But also, not many people are actually going to care. Because not many people actually notice the little details. If you were doing, say, a novel, and you were like transposing this kind of stuff into it, I would say be very careful with it, because critical reviewers will notice it. So don't, like, be very careful with your imagery. Don't mix up imagery and then use the presence of the imagery as the defining factor when the imagery itself is not special. So that's like the overall thing there, but it doesn't really matter for Hero Academia at this moment. I should say, you know, when it comes to drawing stuff on manga, you get away with this kind of stuff, like conflating imagery. You get away with it a little bit more because the imagery is so easy to miss. The problem with novels is that every image is intentionally written for the reader to notice. So that's why it's a little bit more fixed in stone. when you read it in a novel, as opposed to like having it just be something that the reader can miss because images don't force you to interpret them. So yeah, that's like a nice little thing there that I can add for this whole thing. People also made fun of like she's zeroing in on the tears of a villain, and because she loves seeing people happy and all that. I really do hope that Ochako lives this truth now, and like every villain that cries, she will be right there to give them a helping hand. But of course, like you say that, but that's who Ochako should be. She should be a person who sees the person behind the atrocities. Not saying that she's going to forgive the atrocities, but to see the person behind the atrocities to try and fix them or try to help them be better. That's good. Of course, some people like Muscular are like totally with you can't fix Muscular. Like even the author gives up on fixing Muscular, right? So moving on. What page are we on? We're going to page 1011 on the Viz Media translation. All right. We go into like just the chaotic page, which is just kind of telling us where everyone is. There's a lot of little details that come into this. Overall, I love the stuff that's going on. I love that Hawks is identifying that they are on a time limit, or like he's on a time limit, so they just have to hold on. You know, one of the finicky things there is that with the rewind quirk, we know what it did to Izuku. So, like, they're very lucky the rewind quirk is working the way it is for this fight, because like the one that was working on Izuku was able to delay the rewind effects by getting damaged. So, you know, like they're very lucky that that's not what's going on here. Now, there are a few other little details here. I love how everyone came together. I love that Jiro is here, but notice that she's fallen on the ground. So she was running earlier, so for whatever reason, she fell on the ground and Suyu just completely abandoned her. Over here, you can see Mushroom Girl and what I think is Kamui Woods. So they're still in the fight here. Gotta stop Toga from making more of herself. Okay, we have Inasa there as well. We have Kami trying to make a dark sky with some Aurora. Alright, good enough. And then on page 11, we have the giant boom that blows away Dark Shadow a little bit. And we have the first shot of All For One. So here we have All For One saying, obnoxious as ever, bruisers who impose with brute force. Again, you have the All For One speech pattern. And he's talking about bruisers being obnoxious. That makes sense. All For One doesn't like doing anything. He likes pretending to be smart. He likes sitting in the back. He likes sitting in the shadows. He probably is the kind of person that in his living room has one really dimly lit corner with a really nice sofa, because we know this guy likes sitting on nice sofas. You know what? Probably like it's probably giving him back problems. But he probably has that sofa right there. He probably has that light, and he just sits in that corner and he just waits for people to come in and like to feed them cookies and whatnot. Anyway, that's who All For One is. So of course he talks about these guys being obnoxious. He doesn't like actually dealing with the straight power types. He probably still has some trauma from All Might, because All Might is probably the most obnoxious straight power type that exists in Hero Academia. But yeah, no, that's a good little bit of dialogue there. I forgot how creepy he looks. He's so ugly. Jesus Christ, man, go get some sunlight. Anyway, we get to see All For One's face here. Bro, man, do you see these, like, you see how dark his eyes are? Those are, like, massive bags under the eyes. No wonder this guy couldn't give Shigaraki any tips on skincare routines. Anyway, well, at least he does have dry lips. But yeah, no, man, like, if I learn anything from this, it's like this guy spent way too many nights under a blanket looking at his computer for whatever reason. Probably, okay, I'm not going to say that comment, but yeah, no, man, probably needs some more sleep. I feel really bad for him. Looks really malnourished. He thinks he's scary because he's powerful. He doesn't realize he's scary because he's ugly, you know? Actually, that makes sense. He doesn't, like, that's All For One's whole life. He doesn't realize how off-putting his face is. Anyway, yeah, man, poor guy. He's probably super pale. I bet Yoichi looks way better malnourished than this guy does. Should really consider doing something about that. Get some, like, moisturizing cream. Anyway, enough All For One shaming. Tokoyami gets terrified by how Tokoyami gets terrified by how bright this guy's pale skin is, and we move on to a bit where All For One is trying to get away. What can I say about this moment? Let's investigate over here. I cannot tell who this is. Whatever they're doing is covering up Dark Shadow, but I really can't tell who that is. Anyway, we move on. Page 13 doesn't really give us much else other than destruction and All For One trying to run away again. Oh, I guess we can talk about this particular spot, because this is a little bit more interesting. Okay, so pretty much it's a narration where it goes, those two men came to realizations that the situation was actually perfectly optimal. So this is, of course, All For One's perspective. This is his realization. What I think really doesn't work here is this part. The repetition of that the situation was, it just looks a little bit clumsy on the page, because what ends up because the way you end up reading it is that you have to go back. Let me do this proper. I have to read it properly. You have to go back to page 13. These two men came to realizations. So that statement is true for both of them. That the situation was actually perfectly optimal. That the situation was, and then you go into like Hawks taking over the narration. I really think that the misplay here is just saying that the situation was repeated. I think the better thing you could have done here to make it flow a little bit better is that this was actually a panel. You really should just have that the situation was actually, and then you go straight into All For One's perfectly optimal. Take out that middle portion, and then you have Hawks's right below him, going with his barging in on narration pretty much. I think that would have looked better visually. You gotta be really careful. Repeating boring words like that situation was halfway in a sentence. It just, if I was doing that in like a novel, it just looks bad. It's not a good move. It's just awkward. There's probably like other ways to present it, but yeah, nah, probably like rip that one out. Now, of course, that's just a technical thing, but like, it's not often that we get technical. It's not often we get to talk about technical things like that. Yeah, I really do think this is better. That the situation was actually perfectly optimal. No, it's not so bad, Tsukachi. Yeah, no, I think that's 100% way better. Less awkward. Anyway, at this point, I do gotta say, like, figuring this out was amazing when we were looking at the spoilers. Because we first found out that Machia was showing up. And then, you know, we started a conversation about, like, Machia showing up and no one found out about this. And then White Despair and, like, I think Jason as well said something. And it made me think, like, oh wait, yeah, no, Tsukachi's been talking to these people the whole time. We know he sent over reinforcements. We know it wasn't Shiketsu. Therefore, the reinforcements must have been Machia. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then, of course, we find out that is what happened. Props to Jason Thomas, because he said Machia was going to show up before we had any hint of him showing up. So no, good stuff for him. No, so overall, it was like a really fun time. And what I mean to say by that is that Machia showing up makes a lot of sense. And the way that you can kind of figure out what happened, because again, the big thing here is that Tsukachi is keeping such a close eye on this that there was no way he didn't know Machia was on the way, which means he could only be the reinforcements. Honestly, really awesome. White Despair did bring up a thing where he pointed out that we know the distance between the battlefield and the Gunga Mountains, and it was like 40 minutes or so, I believe White Despair said. He can like put it in the comments if he's there and watching the video. And I'm not sure 40 minutes have actually passed, so I don't know how Machia got there that quickly. Because it doesn't feel like these guys have been fighting for very long. We'll have to see what the author says, because he probably knows that the timeline is finicky. So he's probably going to like put a note about how Machia got there faster than ever before. But overall, yeah, man. Cool page. It was a cool moment getting the drops every 20 minutes and figuring out what was going on. So we go into the final moments here, where we have Machia throwing a good chunk of land at All For One, him calling people pests, and we see that there's a bunch of people standing up here. Now, I saw people were kind of worried about Mina, Tai specifically, and I see 4 distinct shadows here, so I'm assuming Mineta's here, I'm assuming Mina's here, I'm assuming Kirishima's here, I'm assuming Shinso is here because they're important people. And at this point, we do have to kind of like wonder, you know, what exactly is going to happen here when it comes to Machia. I personally think it would be amazing if all For One's tampering with Machia has made Machia the perfect slave for Shinso. Because people point out, Machia can't feel pain. So, heck, can you even give him a good rock to the head? I don't know. Now, the thing is, like, I would be careful with the whole pain thing, because, like, even if you can't feel pain, if someone gives Machia a good enough blast to the head, and it causes his brain to hit the interior of his skull and give him a concussion, I think that's enough to actually, like, snap him out of it. But you never really know. That's getting really technical. I think that would be enough, but I don't think it's possible to actually rock Machia's brain. Now, there are many things that are going into the whole Machia situation when it comes to, like, okay, you know, is Machia gonna... How is this gonna go with All For One? So, here's the stuff for Shinso. These are, like, the pluses on his side to say that, hey, Shinso is gonna control Machia. Okay, so I can't get it to move there, but this is pretty much what we're dealing with. So when it comes to Shinso, he has a few things to his advantage. Machia listens to recordings. In other words, you don't actually have to be the right owner of the voice. He will listen to pre-recorded things, which means he's susceptible to anything that sounds like All For One's voice. Oh, another thing is that All For One's voice right now is squeaky, so that might also be a thing against All For One. And Machia was engineered to be a servant, which just really says that a lot of, like, it makes it easier for someone to take control if they have the parameter All For One's voice. And it would be ironic. That's another big thing that's another big thing to Shinso's advantage. The idea that All For One's best servant is so good that anyone that sounds like All For One can take over. Like it's funny, right? So like there's that dramatic irony there that kind of like might be guiding the author's hand on that one. Those are the things that are on Shinso's side on this one. When you talk about like, okay, what chance does All For One have in taking control back, or like even having like a back and forth here? It's really the Machia weird sense. You know, specifically that ability that he has to smell All For One to be able to identify his master. That's probably the single most dangerous thing here. And then this actual power here that I have refers to more that All For One has the stopping power to be able to like rock Machia's brain if it comes down to it. Or he might have some other power that attacks Machia's mind in a very unique way. We know the vestiges can interfere with Shinso's mind-altering quirk. So he might be able to do something Vestige World related to get Machia back for a little bit. But it will be probably a back and forth between these two. Now, one thing here when it comes back to Machia, and it kind of it fights the Machia weird sense. When Shinso places someone under control, they do end up in an altered state of consciousness, such that you have to wonder, well, okay, can Machia even use his weird sense if Shinso is messing with his mind? Is Shinso's mind control screwing up the extrasensory perception that Machia is afforded? That's pretty much what it comes down to. You also see that Machia is pretty much fighting blind here right now because he's got his eyes covered in that rock. So yeah, you have to wonder if he's in Berserker Rage, because he might not listen to the other All For One at all if he's in Berserker Rage. So Shinso actually has a lot of things that could allow him to really do some damage with Machia for a while here, which good for him, right? Anyway, when it comes to the future now, it's cool that we have Shinso here. I gotta say, I didn't expect to get Shinso in this battlefield in this way, so props to Horikoshi for that. Very exciting. What's gonna happen? Ultimately, All For One's gonna keep trying to run away. Right? It's really like what this all comes down to is really how many people are gonna be brought into this battlefield to slow down All For One. I would love it if we actually get every single Class 1A student here to get one shot in on All For One. That would be amazing. Now, when it comes to Kirishima, given that this just suddenly happened, and given that Kirishima is bloody, we're probably gonna see a quick flashback at the next chapter of how Kirishima got here. But I'm not too concerned over these characters not getting screen time. I'm pretty sure Mineta's going to get screen time. I'm pretty sure Mina's going to get screen time. I'm pretty sure Kirishima's going to get screen time. Overall, though, chapter 382 of Hero Academia, yeah, no, man, it was a fun chapter. I really enjoyed it. Now, let me very quickly go through my predictions for the future. And it won't take that much longer. I noticed that I'm 40 minutes already over on the recording, and I don't want to take much longer. So this is my new little bit of Hero Academia bingo. I'll just very quickly go through my big predictions for the future. You know what? This might be a little bit arrogant of me, but I think I could get all these right. Anyway, we start at the top. Shigi Hand Monster starts spreading across Japan. What I'm imagining is that when we're getting to like the final moments, Shigaraki like freaks out, goes pure cosmic horror. He starts like spreading out, like it's just a mass of flesh. It starts covering up all of Japan. That's pretty much what I mean. It's gonna be like a giant monster, and then like while that's going on, like Izuku Vestige World shenanigans can happen. Next square, All Might dies to Shigaraki. I think that's a pretty good chance, like a good 33% chance of that happening. This kind of leads into the next square where All Might dies with rhetoric about how he chose his fate, or how he pretty much dies a hero. Like this square is really important because you still have Night Eye's prediction about All Might dying to a villain. So what's really important here is that if this happens, All Might says, well, no, I wasn't killed by a villain. I died being a hero. I died sacrificing myself, right? He'll like recontextualize it to make it sound like it's his choice to do this, and that it wasn't exactly Night Eye's future prophecy if that thing is still in play. Of course, I'm betting on the thing still being in play. We then have Shigi Hand Monster produces flesh dolls of for other heroes to fight. What that pretty much means is like when we're at the end, the heroes need to do something. So they'll be fighting giant masses of flesh, and then there will be like, I don't know, other Shigarakis coming out and fighting, just to give the heroes something to do. Toga will join first with heroes to try and save Shigaraki. That's pretty simple. It's like at some point when Shigaraki is being like mind violated by All For One, Toga will be there calling out to Shigaraki and like trying to save him. Heck, maybe, you know what? It'd be cool if that's the moment when Toga is able to use Decay. That would be pretty cool, because using it against the Hand Monster, pretty good. Is there any reason why the Hand Monster wouldn't use Decay automatically? Well, we'll see what Horikoshi comes up with. Next square I have is like Mr. Compress returns to call Shigaraki back from the brink. We know Mr. Compress is coming back. I think he's going to come back specifically to like call out Shigaraki's name. Class 2A will help Aizawa and save him. We know Class 2A is coming back. It's just where they're coming back. Given that Aizawa is probably in peril, he probably is going to be helped out by Class 2A. Higanto Machia is Crimson Riot. This is a theory I've had for a very long time. And I know that Higanto Machia does not have a quirk that Crimson Riot used to have. I know that making this work is going to take them finagling. I know, but I trust Horikoshi. Higanto Machia is Crimson Riot. Because like Kirishima is Red Riot, right? Yeah, Crimson Riot. I'm pretty sure. Higanto Machia is Crimson Riot. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Death Arms will have a chapter showing how he became a hero again. Specifically, the story of how he became heroes. It'll focus on Death Arms. The reason that one comes up is because we know something finicky is going on with the pods from UA. So we probably have to assume Skeptic did something. We have to assume that the people in UA are going to be imperiled because there are agents from All For One there, and Death Arms is with them. So Death Arms will probably have a big moment where he comes back and he's a hero. Shiki will kill Child All For One. This is an idea that really came out last week. I love the idea of Shigaraki like dusting Child All For One, and I would love it if he makes some kind of like, if he makes some kind of statement about how he's gonna ruin the child, how All For One ruined him when he was a child. I would love that. Killing All For One will screw Shigaraki over. That's pretty simple. Kill All For One, and then that's the moment All For One fully takes over Shigaraki, and we go into like the final stages probably. Probably. The All Might vestige fully forms within Izuku when All Might dies. I think this is another like very likely thing to happen. One for All first got passed on when Yoichi took a hit for the second user. What I'm referring to here is that it's the story of how One for All started. I imagine that All For One attacked second user. Yoichi got in the way. Yeah, I think that's his name, yeah? Whatever. Yoichi got in the way, blood fell out of Yoichi and fell into the second user's mouth. Pretty simple. At some point, that's how he gets the scar to second user. Then we have Bakugo saves Izuku from Shigi on his return. So what I mean is, like, when things look very scary for Izuku, I don't know why they would look scary, but when they do, Bakugo will come out of nowhere, he'll, like, blast Shigaraki, and that'll give Izuku a few seconds to get away. Now, this one is, this one I felt was, like, too easy, so for this square to be true, both things have to happen. Aoyama has a big moment against Kuineta, and then international heroes appear versus Hand Monster. Honestly, if the author just wants to say the international heroes are keeping all for one's allies across the world under control, I think that'll be fine too. But if they show up against the Hand Monster, that'll be fine. I'm pretty sure the author's going to reuse the weather reporter lady that was talking big against All For One. Next one, Ochako says she's going to tell Izuku how she feels after the war is over. That's just like so like. That would just be so stereotypical for this kind of story that it's gonna happen. Ida drives Shoto over to Endeavor versus Dobby. I think that would be funny. Hori's old main characters appear during the final round. I think that's almost guaranteed. I don't think there's any way this man is not going to bring back his old main characters. Izuku and All Might and Bakugo in Vestige World versus All For One. Now, usually I would say Izuku and All Might and just those two, but I kind of like the idea of Bakugo in Vestige World as well. I think that'd be cool. You know, why not? Yeah. It's like this one probably might not happen, but like, yeah, shit, let's do it. Vestige self-destruct to take All For One with them. It's pretty much like at the very end, like I'm pretty sure Yoichi's gonna hug his brother, and they're gonna go into the afterlife together. And then like Izuku's left without the vestiges. He probably keeps the One For All power package though. Tenko is revived through Hand Monster physics. That pretty much means that if Shigaraki starts making flesh dolls, Tenko can probably escape Shigaraki through a flesh doll. Endeavor hugs Toya. I think this is very likely that at some point during that fight, there's gonna be a hug. All For One is not Izuku's dad. This is more like a wish instead of something I know. So I'm casting that wish into the ethers, and I'm really hoping that it comes true. And Death Arms saves Eri. I just need to give him something to do. So yeah, at some point Eri will be in trouble, and then Death Arms can save her and like be a hero again. And she might have a moment where she gets to be a hero too. Anyway, those are my quick predictions. The video is at 52 minutes, so I need to cut this and I need to edit it. Guys, let me know what you thought down below, and till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day. Stay safe.